Well, welcome back. We've been discussing several things over the last couple of videos. So I'm Neil Sharpe, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and my friend Alice Stricklin is with us. So
yes, thank you, Neil.
Yes.
So I'm Alice Stricklin, and I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we've been talking about mental health in the church, which is a dicey topic that we've really, I feel like, and for the last couple of videos have talked through several different really big topics. Today, we hope to talk through action steps and resources. So Neil.
Yes, I have questions.
Okay.
So my first question really is, what steps or practices that we can do to help support mental health on the continuum we've talked about the last two videos?
Yeah, so in video 1, we introduced the continuum of, there's a continuum of physical health, and there's also a continuum of mental health. And when we think about that continuum, the way that I'd like to kind of introduce action steps or resources is from a place of, we're going to start with that one end of the continuum where it's maybe more seasonal, right? And there's some practices that you can do that can help help symptoms to go down or decrease. Maybe even eliminate.
Yes, right.
And then we're going to keep those practices and add more when we get to more of that moderate end of the continuum. And then keep those practices and add more when we get to the extreme.
So if you were looking at, go back to your continuum on physical health, it's like better diet, sleep, exercise. These kind of things, if we incorporate them into our lifestyle, then you can add on different things as we move down the continuum. And in our mental health, we're talking about moving down the continuum, meaning that things are getting more severe.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe we can talk first about the on the one end that's more seasonal. Right? Or situational things that might come up.
So do you have a few things there?
Yeah, so I like to cover just the basics first with clients. I always, when they first come in, and if it feels more like it's a situation or seasonal, actually, if it feels any of those categories on that continuum, one of the first questions I always ask clients is, when's the last time you had a physical, like a complete physical?
So looking at the biological aspects of that client.
Yes, we want to rule that out first, right? Because I don't want to treat them for something that isn't going to change if there's a biological component to it.
You're kind of working against the system, aren't you?
That's exactly right, right. And so that's one of the first places I kind of start and ask. And then the other thing I start assessing really quickly in treatment is I start asking about sleep hygiene. Like, what's the sleep? How much sleep are they getting? Are they getting consistent sleep? Because that is a huge determinant of mental health and emotional health.
There was there's a book called Why We Sleep.
I haven't read it.
It goes into all the reasons why it's important. And it's amazing how much clears up in a lot of people's lives if they are sleeping properly. So you're right.
Oh, I've seen dramatic shifts for people. Where we start assessing their sleep, and they may go to a sleep study or talk to their doctor and get some things adjusted. And as soon as they start sleeping more consistently and better, dramatic shifts in their symptoms.
Well, now you and I could probably geek out.
We could.
Talking about all the different aspects of it, but it's so important.
It's really important. And then one of the other things I start asking about is hydration. Like, how much water are they drinking? What's their diet look like? Because there's lots of studies around even like what we put into our bodies in terms of carbohydrates, different chemicals that can also impact some of the things on this continuum that we're talking about.
So like just simply waking up in the morning and drinking like 16 ounces of water. Can make a drastic
big difference.
Change.
Right? I've had some clients, they look at me like, is it that easy? And I'm like, let's just try it. It's like an experiment. Let's just try it and see if it starts to make a difference. And it's amazing.
The only side effect, it sounds like one of those drug commercials, is you might have to go to the bathroom.
That's right. Yeah. So, and then, so I kind of ask about those kind of common things first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also ask about movement. Like, are we getting our body moving?
Yes.
Is there some exercise happening?
Right.
And I kind of check in on some of those things.
Yeah.
And so those are things I assess.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start offering practices along those lines.
Yes.
For that first line of defense, if you will.
Right.
What about you?
Well, I know that there's a book. I'm not too happy about the title, called Depression Cure. I don't think the author was very happy about that. But I think the publisher wanted to do it.
The publisher, yeah.
But there was like 6 things that, and what we call empirically researched, mean really researched well, that help ward off, doesn't necessarily cure it, but helps to kind of stay it off. And so those are light. And so that means sunlight. Well, we know that some people live in parts of the country where they don't get a lot of sunlight. And so in that situation, you can go on Amazon and buy a light that's made for that kind of thing. And you can have light exposure in the morning, and that helps to bring, helps with sleep, because it changes and tells you it's time to wake up, time to go to bed. So when you're looking at light, and another one is exercise, of course, walking. And they're not talking about like going and doing Rocky Balboa. We're talking about walking down the street for 30 minutes or a few times a week. So that was good. Sleep, like as we talked about, as one of those. Community, of having a relationship or community in order to do these kind of things.
Can I add to that? I when I think about relationship or community, it's almost like, I think one of the ways I ask clients is I'll say, do you have someone that you know like has your back? Or do you have someone that you know cares about you?
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And typically people can name someone.
So that's like a sense of gratitude to know that I have someone, I'm not alone. Okay. Yes.
And so it's a way of kind of describing, and it's also a way, as we're starting to also talk about the ways the church can be for people, it's like, can you be that someone who they know they can call, or they know that
praying for them,
or, has your back, right?
Yep.
Checking on them.
Yep. Right. Right. And that's that part of that community is when in this book talks about how that is so important to our whole system. Another one's diet, and they specifically in the book talked about taking fish oil and the right combination of fish oil and vitamin D, which I take every day.
Me too.
Because with the work we do, we have to take certain supplements that help us to sleep better and also help us with our mental health. So we have to really, fish oil.
I notice a big difference when I if I forget my vitamin D.
Right. So that's very helpful. And the last part is don't ruminate. And ruminate means don't sit there and think about a negative thing. I think I shared in the other videos that people with anxiety tend to ruminate. We can think of the worst thing in the world. And an introvert with anxiety, our brains are made, if you get trash in there, it just stays in there. So ruminating is not good for me, but it's not good for anybody. Right. So to think about negative things and to keep just circulating those in your head are not good.
And one of the ways that I work with clients, and I'm wondering if you have something too, is I talk about it's catching ourselves in the cycle of rumination.
Yes.
Right. And so I talk about it's like this nagging thing. It could be a topic that you're kind of really thinking on, or almost obsessing, fixated on, or something that you just keep mulling over in your head over and over.
Like when I watch this video back and I think, oh my gosh, did I say that?
That's right.
And I wish I hadn't said.
Yeah,
I could get in that really bad place, right?
And so it may not be the same thing over and over, but it may be the same topic.
Yes.
Right? That you keep working over and over in your head, or you're thinking that other people are thinking something about you or saying something, and you just keep kind of working. And
you start to live into this story in your head, right?
You're like another way I say it's like you're entertaining that.
Right.
You're giving it attention.
Okay.
And so the first step is to kind of catch when you're doing it, right? And we don't always catch it right away.
No.
Sometimes it takes one of the things my kids will do if I'm in my internal world is they like to do this to me to catch
snap out of it.
To snap me right back to the present. And so it's almost like in that moment, like having some kind of a mechanism or something. Sometimes it's a word or something that helps people catch.
Yes.
I'm in it. Mm-hmm. And then there's this space where we can begin to shift our focus and attention on something else. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just start shifting your focus and attention on your immediate present moment surroundings.
So be present.
Yes.
Ground yourself.
Yes.
And we have different kinds of things as therapists. We help people grounding, like get in touch with your five senses.
Yes.
To be able to kind of bring yourself back in here away from that. We're not trying to stop anything.
That's right.
We know that doesn't work.
Right. Right.
Stop thinking that way. It doesn't work.
That thinking may still be happening here in the background.
Yes, but we've redirected our attention.
But I'm redirecting and bringing my focus somewhere else. So it might look like where I just start saying, okay, well, I like this rug, right? Yeah. And I'm noticing maybe this plant over here, and I notice that table there, and the color green. I'm smell my cinnamon tea, right? I can taste that on my mouth here for a second. I can take in a deeper breath.
Because maybe I haven't taken a breath in the last 2 or 3 minutes.
That's right. Because usually that's what happens. We talked about that in another video. We can start disconnecting from our body and emotions. When we're stuck in that kind of ruminating or thinking process, oftentimes what happens in that disconnection process, I know I do it. I hold my breath.
Yes. Yeah, I have to tell myself to breathe.
Right.
Even in my sessions, like, you haven't taken
yes.
in my head, like, you haven't taken a breath.
Yes.
Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath.
Right.
And so the process of doing that shifts things.
Right.
It shifts things in the brain, and it gets us back online, reconnected into the body.
So this is kind of in that continuum of like seasonal. Like, what can we do to kind of daily incorporate these things to help us to be in better health? But now we're like moving a little bit further down the continuum.
Can I add one thing before we jump there?
No, that's fine. Okay. I'm moving too fast.
That's okay. It just occurred to me it's really important because we're talking about mental health in the church. Okay. And maybe you can speak to this, where spiritual disciplines actually fit in with practices.
So what do you mean by when you say that? That's one of those big, theology.
Sure, it's a big theology term. I guess I think about, like, Richard Foster actually has a book on spiritual celebration of discipline, and he talks about spiritual disciplines. But we have anywhere from like individual to corporate disciplines, right? So we have like reading and meditating on scripture. Prayer, like a contemplative prayer practice. It could look like confessional.
Yeah, well, tell me more about that, because that sounds scary.
Right. To some people it does, but there's actually, for some people and for a lot of people, the process of confessing what you're experiencing or what you've been doing or what you are going through, and someone being a compassionate listener in that, there's actually a chemical release that can happen that can help settle.
So is that confessing in this, like, I'm going through some really hard stuff, like the Psalms?
Sure.
Is it like the Psalms?
It could look like that.
And is that directed to God or a person, or both? Both. And that person that's sitting there, you're saying there's a chemical kind of reaction that we have as we confess. And it's really interesting because I've listened to some books on saying how confession looks like in a certain way that it was like to one. But when we look at that and we confess to one another in congregation, going back to community, and it's safe.
Yes.
You're saying that
it can be really powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we kind of go along the lines of, we talked in the second video about even certain behaviors or even like addictions. There can be a confessional process that happens in that community a lot of times.
You're right. Yeah.
So when we go back to kind of spiritual disciplines, it can even look like worship, like communal worship, like what we do on when we gather together on the certain days of the week. Everybody does it different days of the week now, different days, but that can be even a spiritual discipline.
Yes.
So one of the things I might ask clients is I might check in on, especially if they are telling me that they are Christian, they belong to the Christian faith. Actually, I do this with everybody, no matter where they are,
whatever faith,
what other faith or religious practice they do, I ask them, what are some of the practices that you do or have found helpful?
Yes, right. Because that comes across all spiritual practices when you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. And so,
even within churches, we have different cultures of spiritual. So that's really important.
And so one of the things, because we talked about when symptoms present, disconnection also begins to happen. One of the processes I like to kind of explore and do is, where are the disconnections that have happened for this person, and how can we begin reconnecting? And so it might look like reconnecting back into practices that have been helpful for them historically.
I'm so grateful we stopped here, because that was really good to bring it back there, because as I think about it, some of the greatest things that's helped me is in the mornings, there's lots of apps nowadays.
Yes.
One of them is called Lectio Divina.
Yes.
Which, and one's called just, there's another one on prayer. And so those have been very helpful to help center me and to have some outside influence to kind of bring it. Some of them bring music in, the worship part, and some of them bring scripture in and help to meditate on those things. And that seems to get me kind of grounded before I start in the morning. That's my practice. I'm not saying that's everybody, but that's my practice, and helps me kind of get grounded. So I'm really grateful to technology in some ways. I mean, it can be bad and be good, but in this situation, it's been very helpful to me.
Yes, I've had a similar experience. You know, I went through a depressive period several years ago, and in that period of time, I found Thomas Keaton's work.
Yes, right.
On contemplative prayer, and got into a lot of different practices with that, and found it to be extremely beneficial in my own process. Now, it didn't happen overnight, and it took staying and dedicating myself to the process of learning. It
becomes a skill, a practice, and I think it, again, go back to the neuroscience.
Yes.
It's rewiring your brain. It's renewing your mind, as if we would say scripturally. Yes.
That's right. And what I would even say is, when I first started doing kind of meditative prayers, even meditating on scripture or even breath prayer, any of those prayers, I couldn't do it. Meaning, like, I couldn't even close my eyes, because as soon as I closed my eyes, my mind was just like, it was so chaotic.
And I'm going to raise my hand on that one, because
say it's not amen. Right. Yeah. Right.
We don't realize how much noise is going on in our head.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's ever taken a retreat where it's
like
silent.
A silent retreat. I'm scared of this.
I did. I did one time, and I thought I was detoxing.
Yeah.
I kept wanting my phone, my electronics, my screens. It was hard the first 24 hours. And then something takes place.
Yes.
So there's so much noise. So to be able to learn to do that. And when we talk about that from a psychological standpoint, a mental health standpoint, to be able to do that, what some people would call mindfulness or whatever, to be able to train your brain to just detach and attach to yourself, to God, is a powerful thing.
It is really powerful.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't necessarily take away what I was experiencing.
Yes.
But it helped me feel like I had a scaffolding underneath me, really holding me up as I was going through it.
Yeah.
And so I think I want to share that, right? Like, some of these practices may not necessarily take away, but they can provide a support system for you when you're going through something, so that it feels more bearable.
Yes.
Right.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is what we are moving through life, and those things that we find that are so precious, we forget because there's so much noise.
Yes.
And you're saying it gives you a foundation and a footing, that when things are so unstable, at least you can reach the bottom.
Yes.
That makes sense. Yeah.
One thing I would say is, so what I kind of figured out is, because the contemplative, it was so hard to just kind of be still and be quiet. I actually had to start with walking prayer. I had to be in movement.
Which neuroscience-wise, and through therapy, through trauma, that bilateral movement is very healing.
Yes.
Right.
But it helped start to slow my brain down.
Okay. Yeah.
If I could be in movement while I was doing it. I also found prayer beads.
Yes.
There's a book called Prayer and a Bead,
Uh-huh.
literally.
Uh-huh.
And it's there's a movement that takes place. It's a structured prayer
So it's
that you
just the
work
kinetic
through.
with-
So it's
yes.
that kinetic. And that was really helpful for me.
Yes.
If I can, there's certain stages that I can get in, and I know that I'm in it when I know for me to be still with prayer, I
Yes.
have to actually be moving with prayer, if that
Yes.
makes sense, before I can get still.
Right. I think I do the same thing. Mine is hiking.
Yes.
And so I really love the thing I do when I've got such heaviness of working with clients for a period of time is I will put on earphones. I'll put on really just music that touches my heart, and I'll walk.
Yeah.
And after about 4 miles, I'll come out, feel like a purge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so everybody's unique in how they go about taking care of their mental health.
Yes.
And again, like we're saying, there are individual practices,
Right.
there's community, and there's diet, and there's biological,
Yes.
and there's all these things that there's so many of these variables that we can do on a continuous basis to help make that foundation,
Yes.
that scaffolding, as you
Yes.
said, so that we can hopefully stave off some of this
Yes.
stuff. But when we can't,
Right.
where do we go next?
Yeah. So that moves us kind of, those are practices, everything that we're talking about, that even someone that's in that moderate or even severe end of the spectrum
Yeah.
or that continuum, I would say we're going to start here too. Like,
Yeah,
right?
we don't just negate that.
That's right.
Right.
And then we may add to that.
What are some things you think we could add to if we're getting in a worse place? Even
So-
though we've tried all this stuff and
Sure.
hey, Alice, I've tried all this stuff, everything we talked about before in session, I'm here,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem to be
Yes.
really getting it for me.
Yeah. So I may start being curious about, are we needing something chemically that would be helpful,
Okay.
right? Medicine-wise.
Oh, but I don't know if I want to take medication.
Yes, I hear that quite a bit. I hear that quite a bit.
Right.
And there can be a hesitancy,
Sure.
right, in that.
Right.
So one of the things I'll talk to clients about is, all right, so let's talk about what in your life is being impacted on a functioning day-to-day basis, right? Where are there days, are you having more days where you can't function than you are? Right? And then we talk about, all right, so if you're opposed to medication, then the first step might be connecting them still with their doctor or somebody to
Yes.
see if there's more natural things that
Yeah,
they can do,
and
homeopathic
it's always to look at
vitamins
that
or
first.
supplements and things like that could help and take place.
Sure.
Right? What about you?
Well, I know for a fact that, I have been on psychotropics before through antidepressant, through just too much anxiety. I had lost my grandmother, and 3 weeks later, I lost my mom to death. And so that's a little bit more than you can bear.
Yeah.
And so the anxiety got into the point where it just looked like I was just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And so I went to a counselor. It was my first one. And they were saying, hey, you know what? The noise in your head is so loud. We think you probably need to take some medication. I didn't really want to,
Right.
but I did start taking medication. It did turn the noise level down in my head. And then I could hear her.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't hear her
Right.
before. And some people have the opposite. Their music's turned down so low, they can't really
Yeah.
get any energy to hear it. So medications, I can say personally, when it's useful for my clients,
Right.
because sometimes they're sitting there and they cannot be present with me, and so they might need to do that. So
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So what medicine does is help get us to a place where we can then do the practices.
That's right.
Right.
Because maybe chemically we're off, and so they're not working because we are so chemically off. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you would add that you kind of add to or do with people in that kind of middle area of that continuum where there's more moderate?
A lot of it's just, like say, ruling out a lot of things. I think I've come from a more analytical standpoint sometimes, and so we're just trying to figure that out. But no, I think I can only say is as honest as our clients can be with us. And sometimes they're not aware of some of the things.
Yeah.
So as a professional, to help them like bring this stuff up. And what I'll hear a lot of time is, my past is my past, and it has no present, and I've let that go and stuff like that. We know from a therapist standpoint, from psychology standpoint, that memories reside in the body and all these different things that we've been through. So helping them work through those things. Again, if they're not chemically there, we have to go for the medication, but we are helping them be more aware of themselves, more understanding of how their past is playing a part in their present, and then we can get some resolution. So if we're in that place, I don't feel like we're in the far continuum, but we're in a place, we're not in crisis, but we're in a place where we're in discovery and as honest as they can be about those things. And they have to trust us, and that's a heck of a lot. When someone comes to see us, it takes a little time to trust us, and we understand that. So we are on a journey. We're walking alongside of you on a journey to help you do self-discovery and to get you in a different place. So that seems like we want that fixed now. We want to be out of the pain. That's why we go back to what we talked about, addiction, and we just want the reward now. And so it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, it's kind of like if we go back to that physical health continuum, when people are in that, like, it takes sometimes time to diagnose even some of those. Right,
because we're trying to help them sort this out.
And so same thing with physical. It takes some time and testing and conversations to really sometimes get those kind of chronic things really nailed down. The same, I think, is true with in the mental health continuum. So when we move and talk about on the extreme end.
Well, let me. I wanted to ask. Say one more thing. Sorry. One more thing is that and we've talked about this, but from our standpoint as therapists, I can only speak for myself, but it's a very spiritual, sacred hour. And there's a lot of prayer that's going on. Like, give us some discernment in what we're seeing here. So. Now, not all therapists are like that. I'm just saying, like I am. And so it's I believe you're like that too, where we just sit there and it's like, this is something that's beyond our human capacity to help. And so I have to acknowledge the fact is we need that help as therapists.
Yes, I would say the same for myself. I would also add in, before we do move forward, is that piece around community. Like with the moderate, in that moderate area is when I do start pulling in, trying to help connect them with other community members.
And if we go back to the very beginning of why is this so important, is that same spirit needs to be invited while you're working with this, because this is beyond all of us.
That's exactly right. So then as we transition to that more extreme end, this is where we're looking at symptoms that someone's coming in and they might be more in like a psychotic episode or a suicidal state.
Crisis.
They're in crisis, right? And so the level of resources is going to look different here. Right?
So what's been your experience with crisis? Because that's something that we deal with.
Right. Well, it depends on the crisis. Some people, like if they're coming in and they are suicidal and they have a plan and they can tell you the plan and they aren't afraid of dying. Right? Then the response that we give or the resource that we need to connect them to, our immediate goal is safety.
That's right.
Their individual safety. And so that's where we look to hospitalization. It's not a favorite for people.
We as therapists.
It's not our favorite either.
No, because there's so many ramifications.
That's right.
When you do this, it's like we take this really seriously, but we know that it'll be a financial burden.
Right.
We know that there's all the work and different things like that. So we know that we don't take this really lightly.
That's right. I was just thinking that the suggestion isn't lightly given,
No.
Right?
Right.
But the purpose of hospitalization, it's usually a 3 to 5 day stay.
Yes.
Is safety immediately is for safety for that individual. And then while they're in a supervised place, they're not necessarily going to get, there is some counseling that happens, but we're not looking for long-term solutions.
No.
When the purpose of hospitalization, number one, is safety, and number two is medication management to help get stabilization. That is and again, all of it is around immediate safety.
And I think I had mentioned it's like a momentary lapse of reason. We are in this very, very small circle saying that this is the answer. And so we are trying to help them expand that circle, to let them know they have loved ones. In that moment, they don't remember. They just want to be out of pain.
Right.
And so you're saying this hospitalization is just to give us a few days, a moment, and some medication management to be able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's that, right? That's the most extreme kind of end.
Yep.
For some clients, the next step might look, again, they need more than a 50-minute session a week.
Yes.
And so we might reference, okay, it doesn't require necessarily hospitalization, but your symptoms are at a place where there's no ability to function, and in your family system or your support system is kind of out of resources as well. Everybody's kind of tired or doesn't know how to manage these symptoms because they're very extreme.
Yes, right.
That's when I typically look for, is there more of what we call partial hospitalization or an intensive outpatient program.
So what does a partial hospitalization look like?
So partial hospitalization looks like they go to the hospital and it's like they're in the hospital, but they get to come home at night. But they're there all day long, doing the medication management, doing the supervision, involved in some group therapy kind of, and some assessments.
So it's giving them some skills.
It's giving them the skills and the stabilization.
Yes.
Right? But they get to come home.
Right.
Versus the intensive outpatient programs, which is, again, every day, but they're only for like half a day or like 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours out of the day for so many days or weeks, where there is some individual counseling that they're getting, group counseling, skill building, medication management, and stabilization.
So those are the different degrees of which, when we get to crisis, what we can do. Okay.
Do you have anything else that
No, you've covered them really well. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen that same thing, and I've had different clients that have done all those different things. Some people think when you go to hospitalization, it's like I'm going to go into a psych ward.
Right.
And that's you're saying no, that's not necessarily. It is when someone's in a extreme crisis and that circle that they're looking at is really small. But there's these other things that have been very helpful to my clients, and I'm sure yours, where they get these skills and the group setting, and they don't feel they're so alone, and they hear other people talk, and it takes them out of the isolation that we don't want them to be in, and puts them back into community.
Yeah, because our goal is for them to be in community, right? And to be in a space where they can manage the symptoms of the mental illness, and getting to the symptoms of the mental illness to a place where they can function and do life with them, right? Not that they're going to go away, but they're quieted enough that they can be present to what's happening around them.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's hopefully that's very helpful to you guys out there, because that is what we see, and that's how the system works. I will say, I know the mental health industry is confusing.
Yes.
For
me too.
and super frustrating, not just for you guys, but for us. We hope there will be things where it's more integrated, but that does help with the crisis.
Yes.
So
there are long-term treatment programs too for some people that have had symptoms in that extreme end. And no matter what they've tried, the symptoms don't seem to be getting to a more functioning level. And those are longer-term care, right? And that might involve going somewhere to it's like a retreat, but it's intensive treatment. So you go somewhere and you're residing there for sometimes weeks to a couple months to get treatment. Can someone be on that extreme end and do see us, right?
Thank you for throwing that out.
Yes. It wasn't on the cue card. But
Yeah. No, I don't know. When it comes down to it, that is a moment's decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's agreements with my clients
Yeah.
about certain things. If there are certain behaviors, if they're ramped up here and they're in like a bad, if they can ramp themselves back down to more of these things, then they can see me. But there's sometimes where we are not going to be enough.
Right. Yes.
For an hour or 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
It's just not what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to make that call is a very loving call saying, hey, we're not
Yeah.
messiahs here.
Sure.
In that we need to push this to a village.
Yes.
Because
Right.
the village will help better than an individual.
Absolutely.
And so we have to have that discernment when it's like we need to do something more.
Yes.
I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know we need to wrap this up. And the only other thing I guess I would say is there are individuals supporting these folks. And I know it's hard. And if it's long-term and chronic, that your caretakers, you need support. You need help. You need community as well. So it's just not the person that's going through it, but the people that are actually helping and the
Yes.
caregivers and,
And
the loved ones.
hopefully by having these conversations, then caregivers can be more open
Yes.
about what they're experiencing
Right.
and get that support.
Yeah.
I mean, I always try to encourage when I'm working with a client who is on maybe that more extreme end, I try to check in with family.
Yes.
How are you? What resources do you need? Is there ways to kind of support
Yes.
everybody? Because you're all in it.
That's right.
And everybody is in relationship with this mental illness
Right.
in some different way.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because as a system, when one person is in a certain state, the whole system will shift and adjust to kind of manage what's happening with that person.
Great point.
Right?
It is a systemic problem.
It's a systemic thing. And so I think systemic support is really essential and important.
Yeah.
And that is, again, if we can bring it back home, is where the church.
That's where the church can play a vital part.
Yes.
As we talked about, it's really good to know that our clients have a place that's safe, that they can go and get the support they need. So we're going to look at different resources that will probably be in the description. There's so many, like books. There's things I'm sure I have tons of books that I are my go-tos.
Yes.
I'm sure you've got them too, and that'd be too much for us to actually do on this video.
Right.
So there will be, if you look in the description, you'll probably find our resources, some links to those kind of things, resources to local resources that you can get, and then we know that our audience we're talking to live all over the country, maybe in some other countries. So we're going to keep it to this just this community, but we'll try to put that into the description, and there will be some more information on that. So it's been awesome being with you, having this discussion.
This has been so enriching.
Yes.
It's been good for my soul. There's been several things I've learned from you, as even while we were talking.
How can we
So
not
I
learn
love
from
that.
when when we have open dialogue? And isn't that the point, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's the point.
That's right. So thank you.
So thank you.